and welcome to the Hybrid School Builders Podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Foley, and I am so glad you are joining me today. I am a fellow grassroots founder who is hoping to make your journey toward founding a sustainable hybrid school a little bit easier. If you are dreaming of starting a hybrid school, or perhaps you've already gotten started, you are in the right place. Join me as we dive into real stories, practical tips, and hard-won lessons that I have learned to help you launch and grow your program with confidence. Remember, building a hybrid school is not just about creating a business or creating jobs. It's not even about just serving the children who attend the program. It's literally about reshaping the landscape of education, and we can do that one community, one entrepreneur, and one program at a time. Hey guys, I wanted to do a quick episode that was, again, a bit of a review, maybe, of the prep planning process. The things that you should have done before you move into building the infrastructure, and also a little bit of a glance ahead to what those pieces are going to be. Remember, if you go to startahybridschool.com, there's more information there, but I'm still developing that stuff, so just keep in touch. Okay, so the planning and prep phase, remember, is doing your market validation. And really, you do want to do this. And that could just be some info nights, okay? Info meetings. And this just helps you see what your families want, make sure that they're out there. But even before and during that period, depending on how you format your informational night, you want to start getting a really good grasp on your budget and your tuition and your curriculum and some of your, like, what your offerings are. Okay, so that might look like just doing are you interested in this idea meeting first, and then continuing to develop and continuing to have meetings where you present more and more of what you're building, what your idea is. Or you be really solid on what your idea is. I'm going to do a 2-day model for kindergarten through third graders. It's going to be, 9 to 3. It's going to offer these subjects. It's going to cost this much. You might have all of that solid, which is also nice to do before you have any meetings. And I actually I'm not going to say I would advise the second. I would advise following the principle of making sure that you feel confident in your vision. Okay, you know what it is you want to deliver, but maintain a little bit of flexibility as you get feedback from your families. But you also, so you're kind of walking this line between your market feedback and being able to adjust to that and staying true to your vision and mission. Okay, so you kind of need to walk between those two things and use wisdom on when to lean one way or the other. Okay. But it definitely helps if you know what your passion is, you've written out your vision, and then you're able to present confidently. Building trust is really important, and people will kind of come more willingly when they feel like you know what you're doing. Okay. And they're not just like helping you build it. Okay. Now, there will be people who give advice and say, oh, I don't want to do that. And that's too school-like, or I don't want you to teach my kid math or whatever. And as long as that's not like a whole bunch of the people, don't let it sway you too much, because there's always one person who has an opinion, and don't let that sway you. If this is part of your vision and a lot of people are reacting well to it, don't get knocked off course by a couple of opinions like that. Unless it's like a majority of people and you're hearing it from a lot of people, then that's the times to adjust a bit. Okay, so you've done your market research. You're pretty clear in your vision. You're kind of figuring out how to walk between those as you go. And you feel pretty confident that you're getting a decent response. People do want to come. You've worked out your budget. You feel like, okay, I think I've thought of all the expenses that I am going to come across. I feel like I know what kind of staff I'm going to need. I feel like I can figure out who I'm going to have to pay and how much. And maybe you've made some contact with some facilities, and you've divided it out, and you've come up with a tuition number. And when you mention it to people, or even just a ballpark number, they're not running away. Okay. So if it's kind of a development of a process. If you do the strategic planning course that's on my website, it's kind of still in the beta round right now, but it's there. So it's walking you through this, including an entire working budget. That will help you with it if you don't want to start from scratch with that. So anyway, you got all of those pieces, okay? And you feel like you know what all of this is going to look like. Then that last piece of the prep for that part is starting to do a facility search. Now, on the administrative end of it, besides working out some of the details of your curriculum and your schedule so that you can answer people's questions on that, and have info nights, at least some of your later ones where you might even be able to show some of your books or give a sample schedule, which will help to build the trust. You also have to do that behind the scenes administrative work, okay? So after you've got a little traction, you feel pretty confident, you're getting some of those details worked out, you feel like people are responding pretty well, that's a good time to go to send in your articles of incorporation with your state, okay? And hopefully you feel confident about whether you're going to be an LLC or a nonprofit. If you're a nonprofit, you might want to get 3 or 4 people that might be able to sit on your board, at least meet once or twice a year, just so that you have a board and they could talk about bylaws, and that's a whole other thing, but you might want to start working on that. And you get an EIN, employer identification number, and then you go open a bank account, okay? So those are like the 3 behind the scenes administrative parts you also want to do, okay? You're also working on your website. Maybe have some marketing materials out there, just like a brochure or a business card or a social media post or something like that, Facebook presence. You have all of that going too, okay? So that's all in the prep phase, and you're kind of piecing that out near the end of feeling like, yes, there's interest. Yes, people do want this, okay? You're looking for your facility. You're starting conversations with that. So at that point, if you have all of those pieces together and they seem to be moving along, it's kind of hitting the ground and it's becoming real. Okay, so now your visits to your facility might become actual meetings with, the host church or maybe a realtor, or, looking at actual agreements, contracts, and all of that, like actually working out the details of it. Now, at this point, you probably don't have much money coming in, but this is a good time to start with an early registration where you can start collecting registration fees, okay? So this is why, as far as the timeline, I would advise that you give yourself about a year for this whole process, right? So let's say that you start in September or, October, maybe the previous fall from when I'll just talk about typical school year here. And you used to have your very first info meeting in like September, just like, hey, I'm thinking of opening this next year. I'm thinking of a 2-day program that's going to meet 12 hours a week and tuition will be around $3,000. Maybe you have some very ballpark ideas, right? And you just put it out there on Facebook. Maybe you don't have a website yet. You just have your very first meeting, see if anybody shows up. And a few people show up, so you feel a little encouraged, so you do another one, okay? And then you start poking around on Squarespace or whatever. You build yourself a little page and, maybe you design a little logo on Canva. And it's October and you have another meeting and people are interested, and a few more people come, and you think out some more ideas about your schedule and your curriculum and what you want to offer. And maybe you work through some more details on the budget and the tuition numbers. And maybe you do my strategic planning course, which is a 6-week thing that walks you through all of this. And now it's, maybe October, and now you've got 6-8 weeks into the process. You've had maybe 3 information meetings. You got a little web page starting, and you're feeling like, yeah, I got a few email addresses. People are interested in this. I think this is going to work. Okay. Now you start visiting some local churches, right? And you say, I need, 3 classrooms, but by 3 years, I really like a 3-year agreement if possible. And by 3 years, I'm going to have 5 classes, something like that. Okay. So you're working out some of these details. You're developing it. You're contacting them. You're going to visit them. You have a ballpark figure for rent in your mind that you can toss out there, or at least you have it in your mind when they ask, or you ask them how much, and you kind of keep that number and then maybe make an offer a little less than the number you have in your budget. You start negotiating with these places, or maybe you talk to a realtor and you start looking at commercial space, whatever your plan is, that's in your budget. It's in your budget. Okay. And you're like, okay, this is like, I'm getting some momentum. All right. Now it's December. You send in your paperwork to the state. You fill out your articles of incorporation with your fee. And you go to the IRS website and you get an EIN. Okay, now in January, you open a bank account with your EIN, with your name. Now you have a bank account and you've registered with the state. You're an official business. You're in negotiations with the building. You've had multiple information meetings. You have a website. And you've collected some email addresses. And, things are moving along. Okay, now it's maybe January. And at this point, you're going to keep developing your curriculum. ideas so that you can have a registration meeting maybe in March, okay, maybe even in February. I found people start getting a little restless around March or April, which was earlier than I thought that it would be. When I first started, I was like, what? You want to know what you're doing in the fall right now in March? But then I realized that I do that too once I got a little further into it to older kids. But people didn't want to make that decision in April or May. They wanted to make it in, February. Now, and also a lot of other schools actually do have their re-enrollments and stuff in January and February. And you don't want to do this until you have your building pretty solid, okay? Because you don't want to move locations after you told people where you're going to be and you've already taken their money, okay? So you want to feel pretty solid about your building by January. And you feel good about it. You have an agreement in writing and everything's, unless something big happens, you feel pretty good about your location and your budget and your tuition. Tuition, it's very important that you've worked out your budget. If you feel really comfortable that your tuition is in a good place, you've got a good number. And you know what you're offering, how many hours it's going to be, and all of that, okay? So now, as you're negotiating with the church, maybe you're also, and this is all a lot of work, okay? So now you're working through all of that and you're starting to, figure out if you need any furnishings and see maybe safety stuff. You're just starting to dabble in some of this stuff, making note of it. Do you need tables? Do you need chairs? Do you need to talk to the Sunday school coordinator about which rooms, which size kids go in? Do you need to think about locking doors? Do you need to get any doorbells or equipment or, hooks or crates or rugs or anything like that? You're starting to think about that. Now, having said all that, we didn't do any of that part until like summer, right before we started. So it can be done later, but it's nice to do it in the, winter or spring before. Start thinking about it. Maybe start getting donations or getting some of your early families to help you look for things at yard sales or on Craigslist, or if you're doing it the way we did it, or whatever, maybe doing a little fundraiser drive so you have some money to buy your initial equipment and stuff like that, January, February, right? Now, hopefully you have a little core group of families that are like half or more, hopefully more of what your seats are. And now you can open registration, you've got your bank account, and you can take application fees, okay? Now, if you keep those application fees around $100, $200 a kid, it's probably better to be on the higher end of that. You put that money in the bank, and now you're already going to have to start, thinking about bookkeeping and make sure you're labeling all of this stuff as you're spending money and you're bringing it in, okay? So you're learning a little bit about bookkeeping, making sure the money is getting labeled as it goes in. It's not just getting dumped, and it's a business account. Absolutely, definitely make sure it's a business account with that EIN and your official. And you're going to start labeling. So you might set up wave apps and you might start invoicing for the registration fees or whatever, okay? Now, as you're working through that process, you're also developing more of those details. You're getting more and more honed in on the details of what your days are going to look like, okay? Maybe you're developing your website a little more. You're doing a little more marketing. Maybe you're getting a family or two to help you go to a fair or help you with your website or help you with Facebook, social media presence. Maybe you can even hire someone, with your registration fees just to throw something out there on social media or something like that. Okay, so you're keeping that presence up if your classes aren't full because you want to keep that marketing going. But you're also doing a lot of other work to develop everything. Okay, so now maybe it's March and you've got your seats, you've got registration fees, you've got a little bit of money in the bank, right? And you're not spending it all, but you have a little bit so you can start equipping your building and all of that. Now you're going to start hiring. Okay, so that's where you're going to hire. You're going to post your job description for your initial teachers, maybe a couple teachers and an aide. It's all you have in the beginning. And you're going to start interviewing. You're going to start going through maybe a 1-month process of looking for your teachers and hiring them, which means you're also going to start looking at your payroll companies. You're going to start looking at the forms that you need for that, looking at sample contract agreements, thinking about employee handbook. What kind of policies are you going to have for your employees? How many sick days are you going to give them? How are you going to handle conflicts? Okay, you're looking at templates for all of that as you're going into your interviews. Okay, you want to have already thought about some of that and looked at some of that. But it's also okay if you're only 80% there instead of 100% there, but you don't want to be at like 10%. Okay, because sometimes as you're doing your interview again, you want to be prepared and have professionalism so that if people ask you questions, you can answer them most of the time. Okay, and so now maybe it's March, April, you're hiring. In future years, hopefully you can do this and bring in your new employees and have them actually shadow and observe your program. But in the first year, you don't have a program yet. So you're going to want to be able to show them curriculum, maybe some sample curriculum, a sample schedule. You're going to want to be able to tell them how much money they're going to make, if they get any days off. if there's any training involved, are they getting paid for the training? So you're working all of this out. And you're also continuing to do a little bit of hopefully admissions. Maybe you have another registration night, another meeting or whatever, and maybe you run a little promotion where if they register that night, they get a little bit of a discount or something. Don't make it too much because then you don't have the money you need. I may have done that once. You're trying to incentivize people coming, and you're staying on top of your bookkeeping. You're getting your payroll set up, and then while you're doing that, you're also going to be working on your student information admissions sort of stuff. So as these families are coming in, you're collecting their information. You might just have them like applied and accepted, but now you also need to go through your admissions enrollment process, which means things like codes of conduct, handbook, maybe a statement of faith. You're going to be developing those things as well. And you want those to be like signed and upfront with people. If you're having any kind of like entrance, so I want to call it like an entrance exam, but you might have that. But it might just be like a little assessment so you know where the kids are at, depending on the age of them. And it also just helps set a culture where you're like checking in, right? You're setting up those meetings, making sure that you're meeting with the family and you have the admissions processes and procedures like going. You're developing them and you're trying to stay ahead of any issues. Okay. So you're asking the right questions on your application and your enrollment, and you're having setting expectations and communication and all of that. Then you're moving into like billing and collecting tuition, which will be, starting hopefully about a month before you actually open your doors. That's highly advised because then you're collecting a bunch of money before you actually have to start paying the teachers and the rent and all of that just a few weeks before. You got to buy insurances and all of that. So as you get into the middle of the summer, you're setting up your building physically, making sure it's actually set up. You're training your teachers with curriculum that you have and your management and all of that. You're communicating with your families and you're setting up your insurances and your payroll systems and your student information and your cost lists and your safety policies and all of that as you go into the summer. Okay? So that's where you're heading, and that's hopefully where you are. And I just wanted to give that like timeline overview here because now is a good time to think about that if you're in the process. And it's also just an overview of the whole process if you wanted a little more detail on that. And I'm sure I forgot a few things, but those are the major things that you have to be working on and kind of the order you want to do them in. Thanks so much for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure you check out the resources I am developing at startahybridSchool.com. Send me an email anytime. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.